of metaphysics going on. Okay, this seems to be just like a dialogue about justice, about standing by your beliefs. But a lot of the things that Socrates says are based on some metaphysical assumptions. Okay, he doesn't use these words, but throughout the dialogue, there's this distinction that runs through it between what you might call material goods on the one hand, and then there's the other more important goods Socrates is more concerned with, the higher goods or the intellectual goods. So he doesn't really name these. I think we only get one thing, or maybe two, that he names by name. But what are some things that he might consider material goods? Things that he's not so concerned with. Some of the things that Crito brings up that he doesn't really seem to care about so much. Well, what's that? Money, right? So, wealth. He's not concerned, right? Remember Crito says something like, are you worried that I'm not rich enough? Are you worried that I'll run out of money? Don't worry about that, Socrates. I've got plenty of it. Socrates, I'm not that concerned. I'm not that concerned with that. So wealth has, it's not really on his radar. What else? What else is he not concerned with? What's the first thing that Crito says? He's like, you shouldn't care about that. What people think. So my reputation. He seems to be inconsistent with this, though, right? Towards the end of the dialogue, he starts to say, oh, well, people will think I'm silly. They'll think I'm a laughing stock. Well, it sounds like he's concerned with his reputation there. But I think, to be fair to Socrates, I don't think it's really the reputation part of that he's so concerned with. It's the fact that they would be right if they called him out on it. Yeah, they're going to say things about me that are bad, but if they're correct, then I'm concerned. I don't want to be worthy of being a laughing stock. What were you going to say? His ego? He's egotistical, arrogant, what? Oh, Crito. Yeah, he's being kind of selfish. He's really considered. He prefaces it by saying, oh, you're a dear friend, I don't want to lose you. Oh, but people are going to think I'm not a good person, right? And so, certainly Crito is concerned with his reputation. Socrates says we really shouldn't be that concerned with your reputation. That's not what's important, right? Those who are wise and are reasonable, they're going to think that things happen the way they did, right?
He wanted to make sure everybody knew that Socrates denied his help.
Right. But he doesn't think that anybody will believe that. So he's really worried about it, right? So I just don't worry, chill out, it's okay. What else does he list, you think, as a material good? This is something I think most of us, we don't think of as a material good, but the way Socrates approaches it, I think he does see it as a material good. Huh? Yeah, his family. Yeah, really, he does. He does seem to think, oh, well, they're not that important. And I guess, it's hard for us to see our families in that way, as a material good. But, if you've ever read the Old Testament, so get in the mind of the ancients, right? Think about it from maybe Socrates' perspective, or somebody from that time period. If you've ever read the Old, or maybe even parts of the New Testament, how are women and children, how are they perceived? What are they for the men? They're property, right? I own my wife, I own my kids, and I brag about it. I read Chronicles or Kings, those books from the Old Testament, right? It's all about, oh, I have so many wives, I have so many sons, I have all this progeny. And so you might even just sort of include family in with your property or your wealth. It might not even really deserve its own category. So I think Socrates, he's trying to distance himself from that attitude, right? I'm not that concerned with having a big family and having all this opulence and all this wealth. And what else does he not really concern himself with that might be a material good? Something that we all have, that we all own. Well, my life, right? My own mortality. But what gives me life, though? Well, I have to eat, and I have to drink, and I have to breathe. But that sustains the physical part of me, right? My body, good, right? So his body is not so concerned. I'll put in parentheses, life, right? Life is not important. The good life is what's important. And the good life has nothing to do with anything physical. It has something to do with something that's non-physical, what are some of the intellectual goods? Not the body, but what other part of me is important? Soul, okay. So that's really the only obvious thing I think that he talks about here that would be an intellectual good. But are there other things in the dialogue he is concerned with that you might call a higher good or intellectual good? Yes? Correct being, or you mean being correct, or doing the right thing, kind of thing? Okay, yes. Acting right, acting good, being just. He uses that word a lot. So justice. And really, I think, you really had to dig in there to find that. Right? It wasn't obvious, but yeah, justice he's concerned with. And you really, really have to dig in there for the next two I'm going to give you. But there's one line that's quite peculiar. One line where Socrates says something like, the just, the beautiful, and the good life are one and the same. Okay? So there's this thing we call beauty, and there's this thing we call the good, or goodness. And when he says that the just life, the beautiful life, and the good life are one and the same, well, what does that mean? Either all of these are the same thing, or they're very, very closely related. Right? So when he talks about beauty as an intellectual good, not a material good, this might throw you off a bit, right? Well, when I think of beauty, I think of something physical, right? Look at all the beautiful women out there, right? Especially here in college. And, of course, y'all are in high school, so I can't even look at you, but most of you, I know. There's a few that are not in college, right? They're actually in college. So beauty, when he says beauty, it's not a physical type of beauty, right? It's an intellectual type of beauty. So maybe when you're checking out, you're checking out that beautiful woman, guys, that's not the type of beauty he's talking about. It's something maybe in here that have to do with your character, or even something even beyond that. So now we're done with Credo, we're getting into Plato's Metaphysics. And in Plato's middle period, in the middle of his career, especially in works like the Republic, he makes this distinction between being, on the one hand, and becoming. So Plato says, in the universe, there are certain things that have being. They just are as they are. They don't change. But then there are other things that are always becoming. They're always becoming something that they currently aren't. I am in a process of becoming. Well, what am I becoming? I'm becoming older, right? My cells some of them are dying, some are being created, right? And so I'm always changing. At least my body is, my physical body is becoming. This desk, this table here, is it always the same, or is it becoming as well? What would you say? It doesn't look like it's changing, but is it? Is it being, or is it becoming? It looks like it's being, but let's imagine that we were immortal, we live forever, and we're staring at this table and we sit here for 3,000 years. Is it going to be the same? No, it'll start to decay, right? And if we take a class in physics and we talk to the physics instructor, he'll tell us it's actually moving right now. You can't see it moving, but I swear, put a microscope up to it, you'll see particles moving. It is slowly decaying, right? And the Greeks knew this. They didn't have microscopes, but they knew a chair does not last forever. Eventually, it starts to break down, and it gets older, just like we do. And this is true of all physical things. So if I'm distinguishing between material goods and higher goods, which of the two do you think is becoming, and which has being? Correct, right? So all these physical things, wealth, reputation, a family, they're in a process of becoming. Is my wealth permanent? No, I could lose it at any moment or gain it. My reputation, is that permanent? No. Right? We learned that with Mr. Sandusky, right? The coach at Penn State, right? Guy was a great coach, and we love him, and let's have a statue for him. Now, not so hot, right? Don't mention him, right? It's a sore subject with Pennsylvania. soul, he thought was immortal. He thought this lives forever. Justice, beauty, goodness. Justice is always just. It doesn't become unjust. Right? Beauty is always beautiful. The good is always good. Because these things aren't physical for Plato. Sorry. They're not physical things, so they don't become, they have being. They simply are as they are. They don't become something else. And he privileges these things. These are what he calls the forms. Plato's theory, his metaphysical theory, is often referred to as the theory of forms. The word in Greek, eidos, sometimes it is translated as idea, but usually it's translated as form. So these are forms. And these are what we really have knowledge, true knowledge of for Plato. Now, for next class, I want you to read, there's a section from the Republic. I want you to read about 4 pages from it. If you go on the website, it's pretty long. But you really only have to read of the first few pages, where we get what's come to be known as the allegory of the cave. So right now, though, for the remainder of the class, I'd like to go over this, talk a little bit about the allegory of the cave. I'll even attempt a little art, so bear with me, I'm not that good of an artist. And we'll go over this allegory of the cave. And this allegory is supposed to explain to us a little bit what Plato's metaphysical view of the universe is, right? So, in the Republic, Plato writes about this cave. He has Socrates tell us the story, as usual. And he says, let's imagine that we have this cave dwelling, and there's all these prisoners in this cave, and they're all chained up to this wall. So, use your imagination. I'm not a great artist, right? Sorry about that. We got these prisoners chained up to a wall. And above the prisoners and behind them, there's this platform, right? Am I losing you guys? Okay, so they got this platform behind them, and ever so often some figures will appear. They'll walk across that platform, right? But that's not really a person, it's just like a puppet. It's a little string or something. And here's a little fake animal of some kind, right? And it's also a puppet, right? Behind this, though, we've got a fire. Again, use your imagination, right? If I'm one of these prisoners down here, and I'm chained up to the wall, all I can see is in front of me. I can't see everything behind me. Well, what am I going to be seeing my whole life? Shadows on the wall, right? So these shadows will be projected on the wall. But am I going to see these as shadows? Am I going to, there's a shadow of a man, and there's a shadow of an animal. Is that what I'm going to think? It's the actual thing. So when I see a shadow of a man, I'm going to say, that's the man. Or whatever my cave language is, right? That's a gaba guy, and there's a jubugaboo, or whatever. Right? I'm not going to say that's a shadow of a gaba guy, or a shadow of a jubugaboo, or whatever I said. It's the thing. It's the actual thing. Right? So for me, this is reality. This is the real. But that's not true, right? It's just an illusion. It's just a shadow. Well, what happens? Imagine one of these prisoners escapes. The chains break. They're able to turn their head around and see the platform and see the flame. And then they start to realize what these really are. These are just shadows. And not only do they know that they're shadows, but they know what causes them, right? They understand that there wouldn't be shadows if it wasn't for the fire and all these figures projecting the shadows. So not only do they get an explanation explaining the shadows, but they understand what creates them, what gives them their existence. But I don't stay in the cave, right? If I escape, I walk around the cave for a while, I start to get used to this world, start to realize what the truth is, but eventually Plato says, look, we find a way out. Let's say we find a little passageway. We open this door and there's the stairs leading up, and they're very steep. But finally we get to the top, we walk outside, and we see the light of the sun for the first time in our lives. What kind of physical reaction will we have? We're used to does that not look like a sun to you? Come on. overwhelmed with the bright sun, right? Oh, geez, it's too much. Overwhelmed, right? But eventually, my eyes would adjust. It would take me a while, but I'd get used to that surface light, right? And then I would start to discover the world around me, and I'd start to learn what the truth is. That this is just a cave. This is just a part of the world. It's not the entire world. It's not all reality. It's simply one portion of reality. In reality, there's this whole world above. There's clouds and the sky and the sun, stars, all these things that I had no idea existed, and now I know. Well, imagine you're the one that gets out of this cave and you get used to being up top, you get used to the surface. Do you think that's the end of the story? Why not? What happens next? What's that?
You're gonna go back into the cave.
I think so, right? Why would you go back? You gotta spread the news. You gotta go back to the cave to tell all your buddies what the truth is, right? And I think there's a little ethical connotation here. I think what he's saying is that, look, once you get to the top and you have true knowledge, once you understand the forms, that's what he's talking about, once you know the truth, you have to go back and share it with others. It's sort of this ethical obligation. When I know the truth, I do the right thing. When I have knowledge, I do the right thing. And the right thing is to guide these prisoners out of the cave, right? To get them to the light of the truth. But this is not an easy thing to do. What's going to happen when I get back to the cave? Now that I'm used to the light of the sun, get back to that dark cave, what's going to happen to me physically? How am I going to deal with it? I won't be able to see anything, right? So here I come walking around the corner, and then I just start, tripping over stuff, right? Oh, jeez, bumping into the wall, knocking things over, right? And then I start talking about this real world, right? These are just shadows, guys. In reality, behind us there are these objects that cause the shadows, and if you get to this doorway and you go up the stairs, there's this world outside with a sun and sky. How are the prisoners going to react to you? Yeah, you're crazy, you're nuts. Or get him back in those chains. He doesn't know what he's talking about, right? So, this is a difficult journey back to the cave. We have to stay and wait a while, let our eyes readjust to the cave, maybe, retranslate things into that cave language, and be able to relate things to these people so that they can do the journey themselves. That's the thing, is I can't force them out of the cave. For Plato, they have to make the journey themselves, but I need to at least turn them in the right direction, right? And sort of be this guide. But it's up to them to find the truth, to find the light of the truth. How much time we got? Oh, we got plenty of time. Okay. So, what's going on here in this story? What is Plato trying to say here? What do you think this cave is supposed to represent? Plato takes a line and divides it in half, right? We'll do it right here because that's where it sort of fits with the story. Where does being go and where does becoming go, do you think? And so if we've tied becoming to the material world, the physical world, right? We've tied being to the immaterial or the intellectual world, right? So which half do you think represents reality, being, and all this, and which half represents the physical world, the world of senses, the material world? What do you think? Is it the cave, or is it this half, right? The stairway and outside. Which one is being? Outside, actually, yeah. This is the realm where we have being, okay? And this half would be becoming. Okay, so we might think of these halves. This would be the visible realm, and this would be what he would call the intelligible realm, okay? This is the realm that we can see, hear, touch, taste. This is the realm that we can understand with our mind, okay? And so I take this line, I cut it up again, so now we have 4 sections. Let me do it right. Let me put that one about right here, and this one is just perfect. Plato would say, look, this lower level, imagination. I forget the Greek term. Like, let me get my cheat sheet here. You don't know. You don't care about the Greek, but no, it's akasia. We've got belief, or sometimes opinion is maybe even better, I think, opinion. Then we get to thought. And at the top we have understanding. So here are our four sections of what Plato calls the divided line. Right? So these two go together, they're a part of the visible realm, and these two go together, they're part of the intelligible realm. Okay? So let's go back to our story. Imagination. What do you think is the realm of images or imagination in the story? What part of the cave? It's just the shadows, right? Just the shadows themselves, right? And then we actually see what's causing the shadows. This would be the next section, right? So let's use an example. Let's say I'm trying to analyze. I'm using Plato's theory. I'm trying to analyze a horse. I've got a horse. I've got the flesh and blood horse right here. The horse is a part of the visible realm, right? I see the horse, I can smell it, I can touch it, whatever. So then what would be at the lower level, below the actual physical horse? Well, what does a horse cause? What's that? Imagination, images. Well, you can just borrow from the story a shadow of a horse. Or the reflection of the horse in the water, a picture, a photograph of the horse, right? That physical horse causes its own shadow. If there was no horse, there would be no shadow. If there were no horse, there would be no picture of the horse, right? So the horse explains the existence of the picture of it and is the cause of the picture of it. So that's sort of how it works with, the story. So we've got the flesh and blood horse here. You've got an image of the horse. And now I guess you can kind of see why Plato was suspicious of art and poetry and things like that. He thought that stuff was the lowest on this divided line, right? We've got a horse. If I write a poem about the horse, that's further removed for him from the real. Because this is one thing that's kind of funny about the divided line. As I move my way further up the divided line, things become more real. They have more reality. Right? And so, just like if there were no horse, there would be no shadow. Right? So the horse is more real than the shadow of the horse, I guess is what he's trying to say. So there are levels of reality. And the most real things, the things that have full being, are the forms. So once I get past the visible realm, let's keep talking about horses. What do you think is going to be here in this next third section? I'll give you a little clue. If you remember back to the Apology, I gave you that Greek word techne. What was that? Do you remember? What is a techne? This is what the craftsman had knowledge of. A technique, that's where the word technique comes from, right? And it could be translated as that. It's a skill or a technique or a science that I make. What were you going to say? Well, sure, I could have knowledge of horses, but what would that consist of if I had knowledge of horses? What do we do when we make a techne or a skill or a science concerning horses? What do you think he would be talking about here? Studying horse. Yeah, but what would that be called? Like technique? What's that? Yeah, exactly. What would you call it though? Horse training, horse breeding. I don't know. You know all the different thoroughbreds or whatever. You might know what's good for a horse, right? You've got some theory about horses, right? You've got a techne concerning horses, right? So it's not physical. It has nothing to do with physical, but it explains the physical. It explains what a good horse should be, how to have a good horse, right? But it's not the physical horse itself. It's a techne or a science dealing with horses. When we get to the very top of the divided line, we finally get to the forms. And if we stick with that example of horses, right? I got the real horse here. I've got an image of the horse or a shadow of the horse. Now I've got the science of horse breeding or whatever. When I get to the top, though, I no longer want to be that specific and talk about horses. What I want to do is I want to see how all the different sciences, all the different techne, relate to each other. What are the universal standards that they all have to adhere to? Well, horse breeding tells me what is good for a horse, what makes a beautiful horse, right? These are all standards that apply to all the different techniques, right? Learning music theory. I learned how to compose music that is beautiful, right? That is good, whatever. So all these techne have things that are in common. These, for Plato, are the forms. To understand the forms, I have to use dialectic. This is what I'm doing in that fourth section. I'm doing dialectic. What is dialectic? Well, if you look the word up on Google or something, you might get some definition like dialectic, it's a process by which different ideas, disparate ideas, opposite ideas are compared with one another, not simply to, debate. It's not a debate. We are arguing with each other to get to the truth, right? So when I'm doing dialectic, I might propose a theory, I might propose maybe what my idea of justice is, okay? But that's just the beginning of dialectic. I propose what I really truly believe what I believe justice to be, and I want you to argue with me. I want you to find something bad with my definition. Why would I want you to argue with me? Why would I want you to find flaws in my definition?
We like debates.
Well, we like debates, but don't think of it like debate club, like in high school, where it's like, well, this side you have to argue for this, and you have to argue for that. Who cares what you actually believe? Just come up with a good argument. No, we actually want to know the truth. So if I want to know the truth, why do I want people to argue with me? Right. So if I put forth this definition, which I truly think is a good one, but I know it's not perfect, I want you to bring up some objections. What might be flawed in this? Oh, you're right, that's a good flaw. Let's try to change the definition so it doesn't have that flaw. And with each step, if you do dialectic properly, you're going to get closer to the truth about what justice really is, about what that form of justice really is. So how do the forms relate to the actual particular things, right? If there is such a thing as the form of horse, well, how does it relate to the actual horse? Well, for Plato, he's got a bit of an argument, why there must be forms, and what they do, and how they relate to the particular things. And I'm going to update or change his example a little bit, but look, I stare at this object here, I just kicked it, I kicked this object, and I call them both chair, right? And you know what I mean, right? You know what a chair is, I hope. You're sitting in one, right? And why do I do that? How can I call them the same thing? Are they really the same? Literally the same? Well, they're the same type of object, but this is that chair, this is that chair, right? They're not exactly the same. If we were really peculiar, maybe this one's a little bit different in color, or it's worn out a little bit more than that one. But even if they were straight from the factory, they're made of different material. So what justifies me in saying they're the same thing? Why don't I give them both a different name? What is it about them that makes them a desk? It's the form, right? But pretend that you don't know what that is, and you just what would you say? Why do you call them the same thing? Why don't you call this a desk and call this a desk or something? What's that? They look the same, okay. But again, we don't want to get to physical properties for Plato. But that would be a good answer, but maybe not for Plato. That would be what Aristotle would say. They have the same function, right? But for Plato, they share, like you said, the form. They have this notion of deskness, we'll call it that, right? Deskhood, whatever. And they both participate in it, right? We all have an idea in our head of desk. We know what it is, we know what it means, and these resemble that idea somehow, right? Are these perfect chairs? No, they're not, right? Are they eternal? No, they're going to eventually decay. Does an idea decay? Does it grow mold? No, it doesn't, right? For him, the ideas are eternal, and also, here's the kicker, they're perfect. So this idea of a chair, I guess, or table or whatever, is supposed to be this perfect universal archetype, this blueprint. And every chair, none of them are perfect, but if they're a good chair, they are as close as they can be to that perfect form of chair, right? If I come up here to the board and I draw a picture, let's say I draw a shape up here. Let me ask you, I hope you can all tell me what kind of shape this is. It's a triangle. Okay. Is it really a triangle? It really is? No, why not? What's wrong with it? Well, that is not a straight line, right? I'm not perfect, right? I'm perfect, robot, it's perfect. No. It's flawed, right? It's flawed. This is not a straight line. And you might even, if you measured the angles on the inside, they wouldn't add up to 180 degrees, right? This is certainly not a circle, right? But it looks like a circle, and we all know what a circle is, I hope. But do we ever see a perfect circle in reality in the world? No, we don't. There is no such thing as a perfect circle. I mean, that clock looks pretty circular to me, but it isn't. Just ask the geometer, right? There is no 360-degree circle, right? They're all going to be off a little. There'll be maybe 359.999, but there's never a perfect circle. Even if there were, let's imagine that I was able to create a perfect circle. Is it always going to be perfect? If I draw a picture of it in a book? No, what will happen? It'll decay, right? The image will fade, or maybe I'll be erasing some notes that I made in the book and some of the ink will come off or something. But we all know what the idea of circle is, right? Does the idea of circle cease being 360 degrees? Does the idea of triangle stop having three sides and stop having angles? No, it always does. But we never see this for Plato. We never see this in the visible realm. This is something to do with the forms. It's something intelligible. And we can't do this to the idea of a circle. We can't do this to the idea of a triangle, right? The idea of a triangle is always the same. It has being, right? It always is as it is. Unlike these physical things that I make on the board, they're becoming, they're changing, right? And so Plato thinks, look, the forms are perfect and they're eternal. These ideas will last forever. It's just like the dodo bird, right? You've heard of the dodo bird, right? Are there any left? But we all know what a dodo bird is. The idea is there, right? And so the idea is still here, but the dodo has gone the way of the dodo, as the expression goes, right? So the forms are not just perfect, they're also eternal, right? And all of these chairs, tables, whatever, they are chairs, they're tables, insofar as they resemble that perfect form. So I guess the form of chair is like the perfect chair in the sky, right? It's not too soft, but not too firm, and really nice and comfortable, but not too comfortable so you fall asleep in it, whatever, right? And maybe I'm being naughty. I don't know if Plato would like to talk about the form of the chair. He much prefers these geometric examples because they're a lot clearer, I think, right? We all know what a circle is. We don't deny that there is such a thing as a circle, but where is it in the universe? He doesn't think it has anything to do with the visible realm or the physical, material realm. The circle is somewhere in our mind. It's an idea. It's a form. Right? And if we want to have knowledge, this is really what we can have knowledge of. We can't have knowledge of this world. All we can have is our opinion or beliefs. So if I say, man, that girl's beautiful, that is simply an opinion or a belief. Is she always going to be beautiful? I wish. But no, right? She's becoming, she's going to get old, she'll die, and then her beauty will fade. But beauty for Plato is the real beautiful, the form of beauty is always beautiful, right? And if we want to have knowledge, this is what we're going to have knowledge of. When we come back next time, I'm going to try to explain a little bit in more detail what the forms are, how they interact with our world according to Plato, and And then we'll talk about some objections to his theory, like some problems with his theory of forms. So if you want to write about this, you can. We'll finish it next time. And I hope, I don't know if we're going to have time for this, but I hope to get to Aristotle's Metaphysics. There's no reading for it, but I hope to cover it next class, because we're a little bit behind. And if there aren't any questions, I guess that's it for today. No questions or comments? All right, well, I guess I'll see you in a couple. Yes, question? Yeah. No, there's nothing to do. If you want to, you can write about the allegory of the cave, right? But other than that, there's no official assignment.